Afternoon. Today is May 7th. I just finished up one interview and now excited to be in the next one. My name is James Peinado, and this is another interview with the candidates running for mayor with the El Paso Liberty Group. Today, at the moment, I'm joined with Gus Haddad. Gus, pleasure to be with you. How are you, sir?
Thank you, James, for coming over and visiting with us.
Thank you for making the time, sir. To start off, just so you know, El Paso Liberty Group, we're just representing a bunch of citizens of El Paso that in the past year, we're celebrating our 1-year anniversary, just realized that it's important not only to focus on all these national and state issues, but we really need to worry more about our backyard, and what goes on in our hometown is really sometimes more important than all the other stuff.
Sure.
And there's a lot of citizens in El Paso and around the county that are just concerned with the way things have been run the last 10 years locally, and we all complain. Everyone has a beef here or there with the way things are done, but few people take the initiative to go out there and run on their ideas.
Right.
And you, sir, have taken it upon yourself to put your ideas out there into the arena. And so, before anything else, we applaud you for that.
Thank you, James.
And a huge amount of respect for going out there.
Thank you very much.
I guess a primary, just a fundamental question is, and we can evolve it.
Sure.
But what is the primary role of government, and then what should we look to in our local government to accomplish?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that the founding fathers certainly would be amazed at what we've developed into. Mm-hmm. I think the purpose of government is to protect us. I think the purpose of government is to provide police protection, fire protection, infrastructure, to help our roads, to help the trains. Unfortunately, we don't have the great trains that we did years ago. But I think that that's the role of government. I don't think the role of government is to regulate continued regulation upon business, upon our individual lives, and most importantly, when we see too much regulation, I think that we need to stand up and say, okay, what's going on here? Why are we being regulated this way? Mm-hmm. I think government also has a responsibility to steward our funds a little better than they're stewarding our funds right now. We're probably spending somewhere around, I'm going to guess $300 million downtown with this latest move. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it was the wisest move. I was asked today at a forum, what happens if the ballpark doesn't pay for itself? Well, what's going to happen if the ballpark doesn't pay for itself is that we're going to have to pick up the slack as taxes.
Yeah.
But what about the rest of the situation down there? We bought a building for about $10 million. We're putting a few $1 million into it called the El Paso Times building. We were gifted a building. We're going to put about $20 million into that. Well, what is this going to cost us by the time we're done? Are we going to build another city hall in 4 years? Mm-hmm. So I think the role of government is to be a fiduciary for us. And quite frankly, I don't think this government has been a very good fiduciary.
Fair enough. So maybe just on these basic things, protection. The police force, a lot of people that I talk to, we all, to be a person in uniform and sometimes have to put your life on the line, like that gentleman who was on I-10, and he, unfortunately, he died from that accident trying to get a ladder out of I-10.
Right.
When they put their life on the line, God bless them.
Amen.
But that is said, a lot of people in El Paso and other cities say that, if they were ever in a fix in a situation and they're scared for their life, the police would be the last people they would call, because sometimes do police do enough of just their main focus of protect and serve, or is there ever a concern of they're just going to cite me on something I don't have a permit for, and so the police are just going to be looking for stashes of drugs or unregistered weapons or something like that?
Yeah, the real question is this, isn't it? How much of the budget of the city is made up of fines from the police force? And I can't answer that, but I know it's there someplace.
Would you audit it?
You're damn right I would. Excuse me, sorry, James.
Not a problem.
But these are the situations that we need to look into. Are we stopped willy-nilly? Mm-hmm. Is there a reason for being stopped? If there's not a reason for being stopped, why aren't we allowed to go unimpeded? Is there a quota? Is there really a quota system for police officers and budgetary issues for police officers? I don't know that. But I certainly would like to know the answer to that, and I suppose that I will when I become mayor.
Should there be a quota, or is that something that they shouldn't be doing?
No, I don't think there should be a quota.
Fair enough.
Absolutely not. Why should there be a quota? I mean, good Lord, if these guys are supposed to be our friends and helping us and protecting us, then why should they be extracting some dollars from us? And that is just another form of taxation.
It is. Just you spoke on they shouldn't regulate small businesses or businesses in general, overregulate.
Yeah.
Overregulating the people that are looking to the police officers for
Right.
help and protection is the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a friend who started a small restaurant not too far from here, and the restaurant didn't work out, and I want to say, I'm guessing, 5 months after it had started, it was a great restaurant. A lot of people liked what they were selling, but when he closed it down, and then a month later I asked him, well, what happened? He talked about fire hydrants, and the restaurant next door to him was grandfathered in, so they didn't have to worry about fire hydrants being near enough. But his restaurant being a new place in the same building as the old restaurant, he would have to pay $10,000 to put in a new fire hydrant himself or something like that.
James, I can tell you about a restaurant that was down here in a shopping center that was owned by a friend of mine.
Maybe we're talking about the same one.
Well, this was a little larger restaurant, and it also didn't work out. It may be the same restaurant that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But these guys went in, and I think that I was told that there was a 5-month delay, that the inspectors cost maybe as much as $300,000 additional monies.
Yeah.
In the improvement of that
Because
restaurant.
you have to pay for rent and stuff like that in the meantime.
Not only, I mean, of course you're paying for rent. So, yeah, I think overregulation is one of the big things that we have to get rid of. We just have to look at that. How can we stifle?
Do the business associations do a good enough job with communicating with the city, and the city just doesn't listen to them on these things?
Well, we do have this tendency to overregulate in El Paso. When I was chairman of the City Plan Commission, boy, we had I would just fight battle after battle with the city council about overregulation of signs, billboards. Now with overlay districts, they want to go in and they want to audit you, no longer grandfathered, that kind of stuff. So regulation is just getting to be a way of life here in El Paso, and I think we need to put a halt to that.
And of all the candidates, I would say this is probably an area of expertise for you.
Yes, sir.
With your experience in mortgages and real estate. And so I wanted to see if you could clarify on some confusion.
Sure.
I heard your KLIQ interview, and I've heard just through other people that, smart growth.
Yeah.
Smart growth is something that a lot of people among the El Paso Liberty Freedom Fighters, they know a little bit more about, or they have a developed opinion about. Have you ever heard of Agenda 21 or ICLEI?
I have.
You have? Okay. And
I'm not as up to date on it.
that's okay.
But
Neither am I.
I have heard about it, and I've read some of Agenda 21.
Right. Any comments on that?
Well, let me start with the smart growth comment that you made, if that's okay, because that's where you're leading up to. Okay. So I was chair of the Plan Commission when we looked at the idea of smart code. So I want to make this very clear, James.
Yeah, this is what we need
I
clarification
want to make
on.
this very clear. The code is a code. Smart growth is an acronym that this administration and that call themselves the progressives have put on the smart code, so that if you're anti-smart code, you're anti-smart growth. Am I making sense to you?
It's a little fuzzy. I get that the smart code is a set of codes, building codes.
Yeah.
And the city
When we
would
brought the
designate-
smart code to town,
Okay. I had a friend from among my Liberty Freedom Fighters, and they're telling me, like, Gus Haddad, he says he was in favor of smart code but not smart growth. They're like, what's the difference? And so
there's a big
this
difference.
clarification is
There's a big
handy.
difference. So, okay, let's just take that comment. I think all of us want to grow our community smartly.
And as best as possible.
And as best as possible.
Smart,
That doesn't necessarily mean that we are all fans of the smart code. Okay, so here's the difference. Okay, smart growth, we agree that we all want to grow smartly.
Yes, sir.
Smart code, when it was brought to town, was a parallel code to the subdivision zoning ordinance that was in place at the time. So you could go and you could say, okay, I want to develop or zone my property in accordance with the smart code or with the subdivision zoning ordinance that was in place at the time. Okay, smart code is a code for how to develop a neighborhood, just like the subdivision.
And is it advised or mandated? Or
it is now becoming mandated.
Okay.
All right. When we adopted it, when I was Plan Commission chair, it was a parallel code that you could choose from.
Okay.
So, the smart code does not allow the market to provide the that's the wrong word. The marketplace to tell you how to develop a piece of property. The smart code tells you that you have to develop a piece of property like a multi-purpose deal like Monticello, where it's mixed use. And I think that's going to, I hope it'll be a great project.
Me too.
And I know the developers, I think they're great guys. And
a lot of exciting things coming from it. But
is it smart for every area of El Paso? The smart code was developed in fine towns with small neighborhoods like 5 Points, like Kern Place, okay, like the Lower Valley, where they're very walkable. You've heard that term before. So now it's mixed up because the progressives have made it part of their agenda that if it's not a walkable neighborhood, well, you tell me that 5 Points isn't a walkable neighborhood. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to overlay the smart code onto 5 Points. Well, so why are they trying to do that? What is the hidden agenda? The hidden agenda is to regulate when you go to remodel. That's what the smart code is doing in an overlay. It's not pointing to growth. So I want to make it very clear to you and your group that growth, James, smart growth, we all want to grow smartly. Okay? We all want our community to grow in a fashion that we can all live together in. Call that smart, whatever you want to term it. But is the smart code a codifying zoning and subdivision code that is good for all neighborhoods in El Paso, Texas? I would tell you no. So the smart code also demands that you have that you do block development. 600 by 600 by 600, okay? And you have to have bike lanes, okay? Now, I have nothing against bike lanes, James, but what are they doing on high traffic locations like Mesa, high traffic locations like Belvedere, Alameda?
A lot of headaches.
A lot of headaches.
A street that's already been 50 miles per hour for years, all of a sudden has bike lanes and
Right. And so who are we really putting at risk? Right? So is that smart? So that's kind of my explanation of that to you.
Tough to say, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much for clarifying on that.
You bet. And I hope it was clarifying, and if you have any, if I've been kind of too fuzzy on it, let me know, because I'm happy to try to make it unfuzzy.
Okay, appreciate that.
It's pretty darn difficult.
Maybe when you become mayor, a follow-up interview.
Be happy to.
There you go. And we have a lot of people that do take a lot of interest into this subject. So, and then how does this? Okay, so and then the ECLI and the Agenda 21. I mean, as far as I know, the very basic thing is just that these are UN ideas that they're trying to get federal governments, state governments, and local governments to adopt and mandate on their own. And it could be Agenda 21, or it could be a number of other different things that international organizations want to implement at the local level. If you were to become mayor, when you become mayor, how would you go about steering around these things? And then,
well, here's my take on that. I can't speak intelligently on Agenda 21.
Okay.
But I can speak to this. We are a unique community in El Paso, Texas. We have a melding of cultures. We have Hispanic, which is typified by Mestizo, Mexican, Spanish. We have Arabs, we have Jews, we have Muslims, we have all sorts. We're a melting pot.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to be like anybody else. I want to be El Paso.
Well, there you go.
And so if Agenda 21 is pushing an agenda where we're going to all look alike, I certainly am not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of the progressives typified in this administration that want us to look like Phoenix, Tucson, Oklahoma City, Seattle, any of those. We're El Paso, darn
Yes,
it.
sir.
Let's build on the history that we are as El Paso. 400 and some odd years, we're the Pass of the North. Why shouldn't we be building on that instead of, oh, gee, I want to look like Albuquerque, I want to look like Oklahoma City, I want to be like Tucson. That's one of the things I fought in the sign ordinance. You know, no signs. Well, how is the local entrepreneur going to get his word out against these national guys? He can't buy the advertising, he can't, so he relies on a darn sign.
Sure.
And these guys want to take signs away from them? That's not right. So I wish I could tell you more about Agenda 21, but I'd have to look at it.
Fair enough. That's always the best way to go if you
Yeah.
don't. Okay. And then transportation and infrastructure. How would you say the city of El Paso has been doing on transportation and
Terrible.
infrastructure? Terrible. Okay.
Terrible.
What comments or criticisms would you have?
I think that taking Mesa and making it a direct route, and we're going to see that one of the lanes is going to be closed pretty soon.
Yeah.
For the Mesa Transit Corridor. Alameda
Is that
the
for
same way.
buses?
It's for buses.
Right.
And so you tell me how that's smart.
Crazy.
Why aren't we finding a reliever route? Why aren't we finding a way around that we can have express routes rather than, look, when I-10 is congested,
Yeah.
where does it go?
Mesa.
Goes to Mesa. What are we going to do? Are we going to have 2 lanes? What about Lee Trevino? What about Viscount? What about the areas on the east side in the lower valley? Alameda wants to. Dyer Street. Okay, so we're talking about these great things to have transit corridors. I don't have a problem with the concept. I have a problem with where it's being done. So we have to find a better way of moving our mass transit and quicker.
Should they be pursuing the trolley ideas?
Well, see, the interesting part about the trolley is that you hear, well, it's going to cost us $100 million or $99 million or whatever it is, but the federal government's going to pay most of it. So why don't we do it? Well, there is this a very interesting thought that's prevalent in grants with the federal government, and that is that if we don't get our grant, then we're not going to get the money. And so we need to get our fair share of the money. I think trolleys are great. I would love to see the trolley come back.
Sure.
So we could use it as a promotional tourist type attraction like San Francisco uses theirs. But we should also make it practical.
Fair enough. And then the roads, just, and I'm sure you would agree. Roads in places like Dyer or other areas of El Paso Lower Valley, maybe even on the west side, sometimes they're inefficient. And yet they're worried about the entertainment, for El Paso and whatnot, making El Paso a prettier city for business to attract businesses. But, are there any other functions besides just the roads and the protection of the city that you would think? Because I know you have a lot of experience with, and I have enjoyed the History Museum.
Sure.
The History Museum is great, and I think I heard you on the El Paso History Saturday morning a little bit, and so that was really good. But how far into these things should the city government get into?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that governments do need to be involved in preserving our history, museums,
Fair point.
libraries, and parks.
Yes, sir.
And that kind of stuff. How far we go with it, I think, is a function of how far the community wants us to go. And if the community wants us to go further, then we need to go further. But the clear path is, what does the community want? All right, let's talk about the zoo, for instance.
Yes, sir.
The zoo is just amazing, and I was part of that because we put $35 million in the year 2000 bond issue into Africa, and we brought Africa to El Paso. How amazing it was for my grandson to go there over Christmas and get to see these animals that I don't know whether he'll get to see in his life. and he was able to pop his little head up and watch the prairie dogs go around in that prairie dog.
That's usually a favorite. I think that was a favorite of mine, just because of the whole interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
So, there you go.
So I think we have a responsibility there as well.
Okay. As mayor, just looking at your card and whatnot, and the things you say to promise, what policies would you use to implement to provide better transparency? How will you be more transparent than the current administration?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do, and I want you to know that I was at a party with Commissioner Sergio Lewis 2 weeks ago, and I congratulated him for standing up and saying that he introduced an ordinance for the Commissioners Court to pay attention to business and not have your cell phones, not have phones, not have your personal emails up, and just concentrate on business. So I think that's the first thing. You need to get rid of, during a public meeting, you need to concentrate on the public's business, not the extraordinary business.
So mayor and city council shouldn't have phones on.
They shouldn't have their phones on.
Or going to the back to make a call. They do that. It's
I know they
disgusting.
do. Yeah. I think it's okay to go back to the little boys' room because you got to do that every now and then, or the little girls' room if you're a little girl.
Sure.
But to go back and purposely make a phone call about the agenda that's going on, I'm sorry, I think that's wrong. And so I think that emails, you shouldn't be doing any personal emailing. You shouldn't be doing any city emailing unless you're communicating back and forth. And you should not be communicating back and forth unless you're communicating publicly about the agenda that's in front of you. So that's how I would try to promote more transparency. Let's just talk about the incident that happened to me.
Okay.
Okay. So El Paso Times calls and they want to talk to me about an incident that happened 22 years ago, and quite frankly, I put it out of my mind, so I had forgotten about it. And so as she refreshed my memory and then called me back on Friday, did a little research and we put a press release out about this. But this was dismissed 22 years ago, and so now it's headlines about having been having a criminal charge leveled in the past, which is quite frankly not true because it was dismissed. And I go through criminal background checks all the time with my licenses as a mortgage broker that are federally regulated and state issued. So I think that is a part of transparency. You have a copy of our press release. We sent a press release out before it appeared in the newspaper, and I think that's what transparency is facing the issues up front and saying this is what happened and this is why it happened.
Press releases are good. Does the current administration do press releases in the same nature?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. And by the way, the Times didn't quote all of the press release correctly. They did not say anything about the fact that I go through criminal background checks all the time.
Two important details.
Forgot. That's right.
And that's a concern that I've heard from several other candidates running, that our media is not very good at keeping honest and objective. It's okay in the editorial page, but a lot of the other articles in other sections of the newspaper show favoritism to anybody who pays attention to what articles have been written about who and how are they being written.
Right.
And I know that it's not the city's job to overlook that, but what would you say as a leader of El Paso in improving media and stuff like that?
Well, I would certainly take the pulpit and I would say, look, guys, I'm certainly not going to give you any press unless you report it fairly. And when you don't report it fairly, we're going to put out our own releases through the other media assets. And there are other media assets in El Paso. There's plenty other media assets. It's not just the Times. It's interesting that the Times is playing the role of kingmaker.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of I'm bringing it up for a reason, but Justin Amash?
No.
Out of curiosity, he is a congressman out of, I'm guessing, Michigan, and he Twitters all the time, and he's on Facebook all the time. So every time he rules on something, he just explains why he ruled in this way.
It's a great idea.
And just every time, would you be open to doing something like that?
Well, if I knew a little bit more about Facebook and Twitter, yes, you'll have to teach me. But I'm trying to learn.
Okay.
I'm trying to learn.
And it's free. It's free media. And
we have
everyone's on
Facebook and Twitter accounts now.
Yeah,
and I think that's a great way to keep things honest and to explain what's happening in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Always, in that way you can give your side of the story.
Sure, you
and
give
stuff
your
like
side
that.
after meeting with your constituents, and you decide what you're going to do.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then this is kind of a curveball, but I've
Sure.
given this curveball to everyone.
Okay.
So it's only fair. But it's a hypothetical, but everyone says this could never happen in our city, and that's when it does happen in your city. Massacres are very unfortunate, sad things to have to watch, and your eyes are just magnetized to the television or radio. And we all looked in horror after Boston, the bomb that went off at the end of that marathon. And a lot of my friends, freedom fighters all over the U.S., looked in horror, even more horror, at just the way that law enforcement executed the search for the two suspects. What we were concerned about was Boston is the epicenter of the American Revolution, was the epicenter of the American Revolution. That's where a lot of the ideas of freedom and inalienable rights were born. You know, Boston wasn't the only place, but it sure had a major role in it. Shot heard around the world. And quartering of troops was thought that's not right, and so that's one of the Bill of Rights is you can't quarter troops in your house without their permission. They restricted movement in Boston to find the two suspects. They restricted movement, went into people's houses without warrants, had them coming out of their house with their hands on their head at gunpoint so they could search each house. And they were questioning whether or not they should read the suspect that was caught alive his Miranda rights. Now, I understand why the other guy didn't make it alive because he was firing back. Fair point. He didn't make it out because he was shooting back at police officers. But the other one, once they did catch him, they were wondering, should we read him his Miranda rights or not? Which is your 5th, 6th, and I think 7th inalienable right that's guaranteed to you by the Constitution. So, in El Paso, we say, oh, that could never happen in our city, and oh, that's a hypothetical. But, you're going to be leader of our city if elected. And so, how will you lead in a tough situation like that? Can you comment any on that?
I can't think of anybody better than Rudy Giuliani,
Okay.
New York City,
Mm-hmm.
when the bombings, the planes fell, went into the World Trade Center. Listen, when other people are at risk, you have to have a measured response.
Okay.
But I think that measured response has to respect the rights of all citizens. And as citizens of the United States of America, we have certain rights. I don't think we live in a community. I don't think we live in a nation that should tolerate militia going into our homes, no matter what. We have private rights. Now, it's a difficult one. We're the safest city in the United States.
So
it
could never happen here.
No, I don't think it's a never happen here.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, it can happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what happened in West. I mean, a little fertilizer plant all of a sudden blows up, and it costs human lives, that kind of stuff. But you're specifically talking about some sort of a terror attack, and so we have to be very, very careful when we talk about an attack on the community, because you're juxtaposing a police organization
Mm-hmm.
that is doing its job or somehow executing its job to protect the citizens, which is our constitutional right, which is what we ask a government to do,
Right.
is to protect us. So the question is, how do we
Go about it.
execute that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I would do is I would have major conferences not before, but we would have planning conferences. I know there's contingency plans for these kind of things that exist, but I think we have to measure those.
Say if the state or federal government, DHS, wants to take over and control local police force, sheriff's department, and I know that like any FBI or higher authorities, law enforcement wise, I can pause it. Local, if the FBI wants to come into El Paso to investigate a crime, they're supposed to get the permission of the local sheriff.
Yeah.
And the sheriff's supposed to be the highest. And in that way, the sheriff's supposed to protect the liberties of his citizens that elected him to be the head law enforcement official in that county. But let's say the DHS wants to take over, and they say this is a terrorist issue, and so we will now be in charge. And you, sir, as mayor, don't really have a say in this. Like, how would you propose to lead?
Well, that's a real good question.
It's tough. It's tough.
It's a tough question. I have to admit that I'd have to think about that.
Okay.
But I think what I would do is I would have to immediately call the sheriff, and I'd immediately call the police chief and the fire chief and those chief officials, and we'd have to have a confab about it. We'd have to figure out what role do we have to play if a federal division of law enforcement wants to take over law enforcement in El Paso, then we need to have the district attorney. We need to have the city attorney. We need to have this discussion as to what our response to that is. I can't tell you what our response would be.
That's okay, but that's how you go.
But I would tell you immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately, we would do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a concern that a lot of us have. They're knocking on your door because they're checking house by house, and they're saying, "What do you have to hide?" Let's say the bad person, the suspect, is in your house, and he's got your family at gunpoint. As the head of the household, it should be my decision to say whether you can come in or not. Because if I let you in, he might shoot my whole family up. And so it's not the police officer's life at risk or anything.
Once again, when you get that adrenaline running, you just don't know what you're going to do.
Who knows? Yeah. Okay.
Who knows what you're going to do?
Enough.
When that adrenaline starts running, you just don't know whether you can lift a car or whether you can throw the darn guy out of the house.
Yeah.
With one hand.
And
who knows?
Even I can't say what I would do.
Yeah, none of
that
us
point of decision.
That's right.
Who knows?
That's right.
Oligarchy in El Paso, is that a concern or not?
You have to define that for me because
Fair
there's
enough,
so many
fine.
misuses of that word.
Okay. Is backdoor dealing a problem? Is deals made behind the back? But you've spoken a little bit about it. You touched on it a little bit, but crony capitalism, corporatism.
So I'm not sure I'd call that oligarchy.
Okay.
But that's fine. If that's the way you want to characterize it, I'm okay with that. And yes, I think it is a situation in El Paso that needs to be faced. For far too long we've had this mindset that our leading citizens, who are the wealthiest, are able to generally cut their swath and because they're the leading citizens and they've got the money. Every community needs leading citizens. Every community needs those donations for medical schools, for universities, and what we've seen here. But also, every city needs a measured response. Every city needs to say, okay, guys, if we're going to do something, then we need to look at it and how it's done. For instance, let's look at the Tobin Center in San Antonio. The Tobin Center is going to be a performing arts center in San Antonio, much like the Bass Brothers Hall in Fort Worth, and it was totally done by the Bass Brothers. And the Tobin family in San Antonio is totally doing this as a philanthropic effort. So I think that when you use that term, you need to look at what the agenda is. What is the reasoning for the transaction? Why is it at the table in the first place? What are the motivations of each party? And then we need to discuss that. Okay.
Fair enough. Everyone wants jobs in El Paso. Everyone wants more prosperity. No one's arguing about that. This would be, I guess, the last question, but can you kind of give us what your main philosophy on creating prosperity is and how to go about it?
Yes. And here it is. We need to say to business, we're open. What can I do to help you? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Rather than creating an incentive program for column A, column B, and column C, and if you don't qualify, you don't come to El Paso, you say, okay, depending on how many jobs you're going to bring or what the whole package is, that's what I do on a daily basis. I create investments and I underwrite large commercial mortgages. And so it is, what are you bringing to the table? Whether or not you're a local business or your business coming to El Paso. If you need support from the community, then tell us what you're going to do for the community. And then we measure it as an investment.
Okay.
It's an investment by the community, because that's where we come full circle now, James, to are we being good stewards of the taxpayers' money? And that's what we need to be. So I think there's assets in the community. I have been invited into several opportunities that exist at the University of Texas at El Paso and at New Mexico State University. Can you pause that? Capitalizing on inventions that are being made here at the University of Texas at El Paso. Tissue mapping is one of them. I've been invited into several of these interesting discoveries and opportunities that exist here at New Mexico State and at the University of Texas at El Paso from a funding standpoint.
Wow.
So these are opportunities that exist. I don't know if you know this or not, but there are several companies around town. I have visited with 3 global companies here in El Paso that do business internationally, have no business in El Paso, and all of their employees, and specifically all of their IT departments, come from University of Texas at El Paso.
Wow.
Graduates.
Okay.
So that's what we need to do. We need to know what's happening. And if we know, knowledge is
There you
power.
go.
And if we know what's happening, then we can connect things.
Yeah. What do we already have as assets?
What do we have as an asset? Right.
Okay.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd like to say for our listeners, or anything else?
I think that, number one, I think that we need to encourage people to go out and vote. We need to encourage people to vote intelligently. And I think that my resume speaks for itself. I am a true, tried, and been a community servant for years. And I'll bring responsible, qualified leadership back to the city.
Gus Haddad, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, James. Good to see you.